Guys, welcome to a classic Western movie review of 1953's Shane, starring Alan Ladd, Van Heflin, Jean Arthur and Jack Palance. Now this was directed by George Stevens, and here he carves out a quintessential Western experience that skirts close to cliche and possibly parody in hindsight. We've got a mysterious stranger, innocent homesteaders, a black-clad villain and a hero riding off into the sunset, all seasoned with a generous dollop of just doing the right thing and sticking to your guns. Literally. Now, these for me are all the things that make it great. It's up there with some of the great entries in the Western genre. It's man of few words central hero arriving 10 years before Eastwood and Leone rode into town. Let's take a look.
You're dealing with me, Riker.
I got no quarrel with you, Shane.
Yeah, you've lived too long. Your kind of days are over.
My days? What about yours, gunfighter?
The difference is I know it.
So, of course, this movie opens with a stranger, a gunman, riding into the lives of homesteaders whose land is in danger of being taken from them. This guy's name is Shane, Alan Ladd here in his finest performance, probably. And he befriends this family, being Jean Arthur and Van Heflin, and their young hero-worshipping son Joey, played by Brandon deWilde. Now, although a calm and quiet man, Shane will soon be forced into putting on his guns again to defend the family against evil cattle baron, played by Emil Meyer, and his hired gun Jack Wilson, a sadistic Jack Palance. Now, like many a Western from this decade, it's deceptively simple. It was adapted from Jack Schaefer's 1949 novel, and below its boy's own adventure style coating, the film embodies the themes of heroism, morality, the struggle of the untamed frontier, and just doing what a man's got to do. Now we have Joe and Marian Starrett here and their son Joey, currently watching all their fellow homesteaders getting bullied off their land. But Joe's going to stand firm against Baron Riker, who basically wants dominion over the whole valley. And Shane's arrival coincides with rising tensions, and it soon becomes evident that the homesteaders could use the skills of a mysterious gunfighter in their fight for their land. Now that's basically the plot. Like I said, it's about as simple as a Western tale can get, so what's the big deal? Well, for a start, George Stevens' direction here is pretty stunning. Shane is a film shot mostly on location in Jackson, Wyoming, with the Rocky Mountains always present in the background, so it feels like a film of huge scope, even though it's quite an introspective movie about people and personal struggles. And Stevens, I think, crafts quite a downbeat movie here. It's not a downer, I don't mean that, but it's certainly got almost like a secret sadness to it. It's there in the homesteaders' frustrations with not being able to settle into a quiet life, and it's there in Alan Ladd's performance, which is a masterclass in understatement. He plays Shane as a guy who's got an unspoken past, who's maybe not used to being around regular people, and his chemistry with Jean Arthur's Marian is great, but certainly hints at feelings that both characters suppress out of loyalty. Now, Shane is strong and capable in ways that her husband isn't, and even her son idolizes Shane because he's some mythical gun-toting hero. Now, rewatching Shane, it's probably Jean Arthur in her final film role here who stood out the most to me. Like I said, she's torn between her admiration for Shane and her commitment to her family. And all these little moments between her and Shane, little pauses and eye contact, definitely add enough emotional depth to the film, enough to elevate it beyond a simple tale of good guys versus bad guys, which was the plot of hundreds of 1950s westerns. Now, what stops you rooting for Shane and Marian to make good on some of those stolen glances is, of course, Van Heflin as her husband Joe, who's, of course, a principled and determined dude, but in comparison to Shane, he's just a regular guy, bless him. Heflin plays Joe as a guy who values community and justice above all else, and really wants to stand up to the villainous Riker, but doesn't have the support from his neighbours. Now, if you've either already seen Shane or you only know of it, you're probably still aware of the fact that the character who stands out the most to people is the Starrett's young son, Joey, played by Brandon deWilde. Joey has an immediate fascination with Shane, like a kid meeting the hero from a story come to life. He idolises Shane in the way that he doesn't his own father, and his scenes with the hero are some of the most poignant moments in the movie. Now, this was maybe deWilde's second movie, and he pretty much steals the film, to be honest. deWilde had a tragic real-life story too. He'd go on to make a couple more movies, but do mostly television work before dying in a car accident at only 30 years of age. Now, although Emil Meyer's Riker is the overall villain of the movie, him believing that the homesteaders are infringing on his business plans, it's actually Jack Palance's quite chilling performance, which he was great at, of course. as Jack Wilson, Riker's hired gun, that I think most people will remember here. It maybe is a bit of a one-dimensional role, Wilson being the embodiment of just cold-blooded violence, but it's there as a contrast to Shane's reluctant hero. Palance has that snake-like, menacing presence that looms over the film, and his final showdown with Shane, Shane finally accepting the way of the gun, again, is a great bit of blunt, no-nonsense filmmaking. Now, Shane clocks in at just under 2 hours, which is odd because I always felt it was a longer movie. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Maybe it was because it would be shown with advertisements on television, but I think its epic look and feel maybe tricked me into remembering it as a more sprawling story. Or perhaps it was because it's a George Stevens movie. Stevens, of course, would follow this up with James Dean's third and final film, Giant, which is epic in length. And then he'd follow that up with The Diary of Anne Frank, which I'm not a fan of, to be honest. But then he'd follow that up with The Greatest Story Ever Told, which is, of course, a 4.5 hour biblical mega epic. So, ultimately, Shane is a meditation on both the cost and effect of violence and the pursuit of justice. You've got Shane, on the one hand, struggling to put his violent past behind him, but also wanting to help the homesteaders. And you've got the homesteaders who also want a peaceful life, but feel like violence is perhaps the only thing that will give them a chance against Riker and his hired goons. And so I think the film is saying that it acknowledges the necessity of violence in certain circumstances, but it doesn't want to glorify it. Instead, it portrays violence as a last resort, a means to an end rather than an end itself. I hope that makes sense. So, Shane's legacy can be seen in its influence on subsequent films. The gunfighter unable to find his place among regular folk, echoed even in The Searcher's final moments. Trying not to sound too cliched and cheesy, I think Shane in many ways is the quintessential Western, showing a snapshot in time, that essence of the American West. The struggles to tame it and survive the shadow of capitalism beginning to loom, with, of course, universal themes of heroism and fighting for what's right thrown in. Now, there's no shortage of Wild West tales that feature a big bad guy and some simple folk that need uniting by a hero, but even fewer that take all the moving parts needed to make a great movie and just get every one of them right. And even harder still to make a film that's both epic in scope, but still deeply personal. Go check it out.